Hello and welcome to India's World on Rajya Sabha Television with me, Frank Rausan Pereira. India and Pakistan on Friday announced that they have agreed to mutually resolve all issues about the treatment of diplomats. The agreement follows claims and counter-claims by the two countries about harassment of each other's diplomats. The Ministry of External Affairs in a statement said that both nations have mutually agreed to resolve matters related to the treatment of diplomats and diplomatic premises in line with the 1992 Code of Conduct for Treatment of Diplomatic and Consular Personnel in India and Pakistan. The Pakistan Foreign Office also issued a similar statement. In March, India had asked Pakistan to ensure safety and security of its officials working at the Indian mission in Islamabad, saying they continue to face harassment and intimidation. On this edition of India's World, we will analyze what has prompted India and Pakistan to try and resolve the diplomats' row and where are the ties between the two countries headed. Joining me on the program today are Rana Banerji, former Special Secretary, Cabinet Secretariat, Prabhu Dayal, former Ambassador, and Suhasini Haidar, Diplomatic Editor of The Hindu. Thank you to all my guests for joining me on this edition of India's World. Ambassador, I'd like to begin with you. What has led or what has prompted India and Pakistan to put an end to this, or to try and put an end at least to this diplomat row?
Well, my experience has been that whenever Pakistan does decide to end the harassment of diplomats from India, it is because it begins to feel the heat. When we turn on the screws and when we start putting pressure on their diplomats, then Pakistan mends its ways. I remember that in my days in Karachi, when I was posted there as a consul from 1982 to 85, there were several instances when our diplomats were not only harassed but physically assaulted. All this became intolerable. Then one fine evening, one Pakistani diplomat was roughed up, perhaps by his neighbors who had some feud on some minor issue. But the Pakistanis thought it was the work of the Indian intelligence agencies. And after that, all the assaults and all the incidents, all the harassment of Indian diplomats in Pakistan came to a standstill. Let me mention that the 1992 Code of Conduct, which you have referred to, was signed in April of that year. And in December 1992, there was a massive attack on the residence of our Consul General in Karachi. There was a big mob which attacked it. Part of the building was set on fire. And the Consul General at that time, Rajiv Dogra, was away in his office, but his family managed to escape by hiding in a bathroom of the residence. So I am very skeptical about whether the harassment of our diplomats posted in Pakistan is going to end completely. Of course, I welcome the measure. Anything which makes the life of our diplomats more bearable and more pleasant is welcome. But at the same time, I think that this may just be a temporary abatement. It may be just cyclical because of the fact that we have tightened the screws here, that the Pakistanis have begun to feel the pain, and they have decided to refer to the 1992 Code of Conduct, which, as I said earlier, was signed in April, but badly flouted in December of the same year.
Sure. Rana Banerji, I'd like to bring you into the picture now. Like the ambassador has pointed out, he has said that it's a welcome move and he welcomes what has happened between India and Pakistan now that they decided to put an end to the row as such. Do you concur with him, or do you, and he is also skeptical about how the Pakistanis might not follow this? Well, do you subscribe to the same views?
I substantially and almost entirely agree with him. Having been subjected to similar experiences in a slightly later period, 1988 to 1991, when I was at the High Commission in Islamabad. But it's a cyclical process which will come and go, and I think diplomats on either side have learned to have a tough hide to take such things in their stride. Eventually, it is connected to other signals which are related to larger diplomatic initiatives politically between the two neighbors. May or may not be entirely reciprocal at all times, but usually are. So we have to take these in the stride as we go along.
Yeah, Ambassador, just taking cue from what Mr. Banerji has just said, are diplomats, that go from India to Pakistan ready, go there with the thick skin, ready to knowing that what is coming their way?
When I got posted to Karachi as a very young diplomat, I was told in the ministry, be prepared for the worst. Be prepared for the fact that you will be tailed and followed incessantly. and I found that there was very obtrusive surveillance on me. In fact, I refer to that period as something that reminds me of a nursery rhyme. Mary had a little lamb, his fleece was white as snow, and everywhere that Mary went, the lamb was sure to go. Except that these were not lambs who followed me, these were wolves. If I went into a restaurant, they went there and tried to find out whom I was meeting. If I had guests over, they would be interrogated outside as to what they were doing inside and so on and so forth. So they tried to make life as difficult as possible, and we were prepared for it. Well, I was sometimes, I felt the strain. I received death threats after Maqbool Butt was hanged here, the JKLF terrorist. I received a lot of death threats. The car of our Consul General, Mr. Parthasarathy, was attacked, and its windows were smashed with iron rods. So there were periods when the stress was really unbearable. But yes, we were quite prepared for the fact that we were going to have a rough time there.
Sure. Suhasini, Haidar, this issue has been going on from a long time now, and and Indian diplomats are subjected to this kind of treatment for a long time. But what has led this incident to be reported by the media so extensively, both in India and Pakistan? What's different this time around?
I think the difference is that both sides have aired their differences very publicly. India issued, I think, 7 or 8 note verbals. The Pakistani side has done the same. The immediate trigger seems to have been in February, when apparently ISI operatives stormed into the Indian premises and roughed up some of the workers who are working on a construction site over there, and things have just gone from bad to worse since then, and now they have been, it has been righted, and it seems that it is okay for diplomats on both sides, at least for the moment. But I think you have to take a larger picture, and I say this as somebody who, as a journalist, I have traveled to Pakistan and faced both the surveillance as well as the kind of harassment, attacks on our cars, that kind of thing on that side, as well as a journalist here attempting to cover the Pakistan High Commission or speak to diplomats here. I have been under surveillance as well. But I think what we must understand is diplomats are entitled to greater protection. And diplomats do have a certain code. There is a reason why even in times of war, diplomats are protected. And I think what we have seen in the last 2 months, and I agree that there must be some element of reciprocity to it, and he pushed me first or I pushed him first, that kind of thing. But we have to move above this. It is a ridiculous situation when diplomats don't have a plumber allowed to come and fix a leaking tap, or their milk and newspapers are held back. It is an uncivilized way for two countries to conduct their business. So I think one has to say, whatever the case may be, this kind of behavior, tailing people's cars so that they can't go above 20 kilometers an hour, or these ringing the doorbell at 3 a.m. and because they did it, we did it too. It does not behove either of our countries, and certainly as an Indian, I would wish that we would adhere to a higher standard.
Mr. Banerji, how do you see this progressing in the days to come? Are we going to see some kind of semblance between India and Pakistan not to trouble or harass each other's diplomats, or is this going to continue?
No, sure. There may be periods of, more amity, but it will be in phases. It will come with ups and downs. And there is another aspect to it which hasn't been flagged in the discussion so far. That is the much more serious security situation in Islamabad. Karachi, we have it's closed, our consulate is closed for many years. But in Islamabad, the mobility of diplomats, and more so Indian diplomats, is much restricted due to security considerations because of the threat of possible kidnapping by Islamic fundamentalist elements. So that is another aspect that has to be woven into the factors that we should calculate when we assess the mobility of our diplomats there. Pakistani diplomats may not be facing a comparable security threat situation here. That's one aspect of it. So I don't foresee any remarkable or major improvement in the situation, in the condition that our diplomats would be living in Pakistan. But this is something we still have to put up with, and we should take it in our stride and do the best by our very presence there, which is essential and necessary to have a feel about which way that country is going, which way our relations with that country are going. The very fact that our diplomats are there and are able to interact with some people should make a contribution in this regard.
Sure. Ambassador, both nations have decided to adhere to the 1992 Code of Conduct. What does the code state?
The code states that the diplomatic personnel and premises of both countries will be treated with respect and honor by the receiving state. But frankly speaking, in Pakistan, the intelligence agencies are much more powerful than the Foreign Office. And sometimes I have been told in confidence by private citizens of Pakistan that the ISI doesn't really care two hoots about what the Foreign Service thinks. So, as Mr. Banerji rightly pointed out, there will be phases when things will really go out of hand. But if the two sides are serious about respecting the 1992 Code of Conduct, then by and large, we should see better times. And as Suhasini has said, we must try to improve the state of affairs, because this is ridiculous if diplomats on either side are treated in such a rough and shoddy manner. But sometimes, Frank, I must mention to you that there is a comical side to these things also. When I was posted in Karachi, I was coming back from a dinner one night, and my car had a burst tire. It had a flat tire. I had never changed a tire in my life, so I stopped and I was wondering what to do. I was trying to see whether I could hail some passerby to help me. Then I got a brainwave, and I walked up to the two Pakistani agents who were following me, and I told them, please come and fix my tire. So they were shocked and amazed at what I said. I said, look, as long as my car tire is not fixed, I will not be able to move from here. And if I'm not able to move from here, you won't be able to move from here either. So they came and helped me. And that incident always creates a feeling of mirth amongst my circle of friends. But frankly speaking, this incessant tailing, this obtrusive surveillance, and this harassment of diplomats is something that doesn't go down well with the international community. We are not taken too seriously in the fraternity of diplomats if our countries are perceived as being on such terms. And I think the two foreign offices must use their good influences to reason it out with everybody concerned to see that diplomats from India posted in Pakistan and vice versa have a normal and civilized existence.
Suhasini, what does India do when its diplomats, its diplomatic staff is subjected to this kind of harassment? What should we do going forward?
Well, I think what eventually the two sides did to bring the situation back to an even keel was to work it out diplomatically. I don't think there is another option. Look, at the end of the day, and we have two diplomats who have served in Pakistan there, as Indians, we count on our diplomats to better relations between two countries. If they can't even sit across a table and sort out their problems, as in, this kind of thing of surveillance or construction labor coming into work, then that gives one a very poor account of how much they will be able to, in fact, do for the two countries. I remember in 2007, we all talk about 1992 and the protocol, but in 2007, India and Pakistan actually agreed to much more for its diplomats. They agreed that the diplomats on both sides would be able to go without visas or without permission to many more places. In Pakistan, I think it was Takshila and Hassan Abdal. In Delhi, it was Old Delhi, which right now is off limits for Pakistani diplomats, Noida and Gurgaon. Which again Pakistani diplomats cannot go to. And it was something so simple that they agreed to in 2007. To date, 11 years later, they have not been able to implement that. So I think both our foreign offices have to understand that they are on test over here. That if they cannot sort issues like this out without them becoming a public sort of tamasha, almost a public spectacle, which is discussed in newsrooms where everybody is so angry that they can't sort of see anything on the other side. That I think the diplomats do themselves a disservice there.
Sure. Mr. Banerji, taking the discussion forward, in the whole India-Pak situation, does this help as far as the India-Pak situation is concerned? Because both countries haven't been speaking to each other for some time now. Can we take ties to the next level, start speaking at least? Could this be a start?
Well, certainly it can. It will help in defreezing the situation, whatever. But ultimately, this is only a small factor in the relationship. There are larger issues, and on that there will be need for political will to, substantially change the status quo of the dialogue as of now.
Sure. Ambassador, what is the future of India-Pakistan ties?
Well, I wish that the future of India-Pak relations was going to be rosy in appearance. Unfortunately, I think at the moment it presents a very bleak scenario. Pakistani involvement in Kashmir is proven beyond doubt. And we have been reeling under the impact of terrorists who have been infiltrated from across the border. Let me submit in all humility that Pakistan's policy towards India is one of pursuing covert warfare. India is a status quo power. India wants to maintain peace and tranquility along the line of control. But that is not Pakistan's policy, because Pakistan speaks of Indian occupied Kashmir as being the bone of contention between the two sides. Now, Pakistan and India have to sit down, and the Pakistanis have to realize that perhaps the only way to resolve the relationship is to work out a situation where we accept the line of control as an international border. Frankly speaking, a war over Kashmir is going to be extremely tragic. Nobody can afford such warfare. And in my book, Karachi Halwa, I have quoted a number of very learned authorities who have argued very strongly that India and Pakistan must bury the hatchet, as indeed many other countries have done. Germany and France fought each other for centuries, but together they now live in peace and harmony. Egypt and Israel were at loggerheads, but when I was posted in Egypt in the early 80s, they signed the peace treaty and live in peace, though it might be a cold peace. India and Pakistan must also find a way out of this situation, out of this imbroglio, because otherwise
Is it a utopian dream, Ambassador?
I think all good things start from a dream. Frankly speaking, Faiz Ahmad Faiz, the great poet of Pakistan, has written that one day a fresh breeze of spring blows, filling the flowers with colors. I have been waiting for that breeze to blow, but it is my right to dream of such a breeze blowing. Of course, I don't see that the relationship will get completely sorted out even in my lifetime, but I do hope that sincere efforts to set things right will continue to be made by us and hopefully by Pakistan too.
Suhasini, are talks the only way forward then for India and Pakistan to sort out their issues?
Well, I think we've absolutely tried everything else. I mean, the two countries have been to war. It hasn't sorted out anything yet. We have gone through a period now of extended no talks, because remember, not since 2013 have we even had a semblance of a structured dialogue between both countries. So we are now in 5 years. We can say arguably that it hasn't made any difference, but we can at the same time say it hasn't made things better either. It hasn't made both countries more able to talk to each other today. And I think there are so many issues that are happening around the world, whether it's on the larger picture of terrorism, whether it's on climate change, whether it's on trade, where frankly the subcontinent is losing out by the fact that India and Pakistan have no real dialogue between them. So I would say yes, that without a dialogue there is no way forward. The question is, when does one want a way forward?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, when does one want the way forward? Of course, Mr. Banerji, is the question. But before that, as far as India and Pak are concerned, there's a lot of history here between India and Pak relations. Some military personnel have gone on, or some commentators, analysts have gone on to call Pakistan a pariah state. So when Pakistan is a pariah state, how can you talk to someone like a Pakistan is another question or another argument that is put forward.
Well, there is also now talk of re-imaging Pakistan, that Mr. Hussain Haqqani has come out with a new book where he argues about the need to, re-image Pakistan. Of course, Mr. Haqqani is not very popular inside Pakistan at present, but there is a section of opinion in both countries which would believe that the way forward lies in, lowering the atmosphere of hostility between the two nations, because we are not helping either of us with the present or past in the relationship. So therefore,
but how do you do that when that on a daily basis you have reports of cross-border firing, you have people dying on this side of the border, on that side of the border?
This is something we will have to live with. I would beg to disagree slightly with Ambassador Dayal. We are not reeling under the efforts of the other side to enhance or sponsor terrorism in Kashmir. We have to live with the situation. We are on top of it in terms of sheer security initiatives. So we can manage it, but there will be ups and downs in the infiltration, in the nature of the well-armed terrorists who are coming in. But this would be a homeland security situation, which our
so this is the new normal that we have to deal with, is what
we
you're
will
saying.
have to deal with this thing. And also, I believe very strongly that we should separately address the alienation of the youth in Kashmir, particularly in the valley. And if we find some ways to address this alienation in a political manner, then there could be a de-escalation which even Pakistan could live with. The recent, reported statements which have come in the so-called Bajwa doctrine, of course some have been denied, but overall the Pakistan Army chief comes across as not a hawk, but as a rational Pakistani, defending Pakistani national interests, and he has sort of advocated obliquely against escalation in the Indo-Pak hostility. So that is a hopeful sign, I would think.
But is the military the problem or the ISI?
It's essentially the same. We should not separate the ISI from the military. The ISI is very much a part of the military, and it reports to the chief.
Sure.
It's only notionally supposed to be reporting to the Prime Minister. That's not going to change.
Indeed. Taking the discussion forward, Ambassador, are there areas of cooperation between the two countries that need to be tapped, that need to be looked at?
Well, I feel that the entire relationship can be revamped, and that there can be interaction and close cooperation across the board. Trade between India and Pakistan is at negligible levels, and yesterday I think our High Commissioner in Pakistan has spoken of the possibility of taking it to a figure of 30 billion. We come around to the fact that until the political relationship doesn't improve, the relationships in other areas will also not show any significant change. Incidentally, when I said that we are sometimes reeling under the impact of insurgency from across the border, I did not mean to imply that we are collapsing under it or that we cannot handle it, but that it bleeds us, and that the situation in Kashmir cannot be normalized because of the interference from across the border. They are casting a very negative influence on the state of affairs in Kashmir, and it is not in the interest of the Kashmiri people that they should be subjected to such negative influences in the longer run. Hopefully, we will have wider people-to-people contacts. Cricket will continue to be played by the two countries on a bilateral basis. Artists will continue to perform.
But cricket has stopped over the last few years.
It has, yes. In fact, the people-to-people relationship has slowed down quite painfully. It is when there are good relationships between the people across the board that the political relationship also thaws. But some people feel it's the other way around, that unless the political relationship improves, there cannot be any significant improvement in the people-to-people relationship. But I do hope that good sense will prevail. And the Pakistan Army, which as Ambassador Banerji mentioned, that the Pakistan Army and the ISI are one and the same thing. They are part of the same wharf and roof. The thinking of the Pakistan Army continues to be very negative towards India. It has unfortunately received a lot of abetment from other countries. The US has been a big champion of the Pakistani army, and it didn't really care what the Pakistan army was up to across the border in Kashmir, as long as it could get some cooperation from it in handling the situation in Afghanistan.
Yeah.
Right from the time of Zia-ul-Haq. This has hurt us, but I think now things are changing. The Pakistani terrorist dimension has begun to expose itself to the larger world. people have realized that terrorism emanating from Pakistan is not going to hurt only India. It
Sure.
will hurt other countries too. And there are very, very discernible measures being taken by not just President Trump, but other countries too of the Western world, which seem to be working.
hurting, Pakistan
And
at the moment.
Pakistan is now already on the terror watch list.
Sure.
So, to come back to my original point, I do hope that the relationship will improve, but I don't see it happening in the foreseeable future. We have to be prepared
Quick
to
closing comments from my other two guests as well. Suhasini, Haidar, what's the way forward?
Well, I think when you say people-to-people ties, what we really need right now is politician-to-people ties. The leadership of our country, as well as in Pakistan, have to explain to the people, if they think that there is a way forward in Pakistan, then why do they need to do it? You know, what we have always seen is when when relations are bad between the two, when people are being killed at the LOC, politicians rise up and speak against the other country. But when they start a dialogue, or for example, when Prime Minister Modi took this very bold decision to travel to Lahore, we don't see a similar explanation from our leadership to people saying this is why we need to deal with Pakistan. Until we build that, we will not actually see a way forward, because it will always be this kind of people pressure that will hold relations back. Politicians will be scared to take the next step, and nothing will follow. So I think while it is very important to have better people-to-people ties, you know, you mentioned cricket and you mentioned cultural ties. There are no cricket ties and there are no cultural ties. You know, actors can't act in each other's country now because guilds have written off saying we will not hire Pakistani actors in India. So we are looking at a situation which is really rock bottom. There are really no ties to talk about between the two countries. If we want to come back from there, if our leadership decides that it does want to talk, or that there is a benefit to some kind of engagement with Pakistan, I think the first dialogue has to be between the government and the people, saying why this is necessary.
Mr. Banerji.
Well, I'll substantially agree with what Suhasini has said. I'm not very optimistic that things would change overnight, but the way forward would have to be in terms of incremental steps, small incremental steps like the diplomatic agreement, perhaps, and also, you know, things like the trial of the 7 accused, the Mumbai accused. If the courts in Pakistan do decide to finally take the trial forward, this could be a signal to our government here to politically defreeze the situation.
All right. On that note, then, we'll have to call it a wrap on this edition of India's World. Thank you to all my guests for joining us on the program and putting things into perspective for us. We would like your feedback as well. You can write to us on our email ID, indiasworld.feedback@gmail.com. You could also tweet to us using our Twitter handles at FRP09 and at Rajya Sabha TV. That's it from me. See you again next time.